capability to manufacture quality transistors in large volume.
They gave their little company a new name that would be easy to pronounce in almost any language: Sony. But before they could introduce their revolutionary new radio, the Regency Company, in partnership with Texas Instruments, introduced the TR-1 in 1954, just in time for Christmas. Small enough to fit in a shirt pocket, the TR-1 sold for $49.95, more than 3 times the cost of a vacuum tube radio. Even so, they sold every one they could make. Other American radio makers followed, but even at $50 each, they couldn't turn a profit. So American companies left the pocket radio business, turning to the far more lucrative military market. Why cut nickels and dimes off the cost of a 4-transistor pocket radio when military brass were willing to pay $100 or more for 1 transistor? That left the consumer market wide open for the Japanese, who were forbidden from producing military hardware. Japanese companies soon cornered the transistor radio market.
Well, the public was enthusiastic about the transistor as soon as transistor radios began to be available, because it meant that you could carry around something pretty small and the battery would last a while and didn't have to warm it up, and it was pretty neat.
The importance of small portable radios was not lost on Walter Bratton.
When the first transistor radio came out, which was about 3 times the size of a pack of cigarettes, his comment on that, he thought we'd really done something, because now someone over in the desert that was herding sheep could listen to a radio broadcast.
Ironically, the transistors used in radios and most other devices were all improved versions of Shockley's design, patented under his name in 1951. Bratton and Bardine's transistor was used for a time in the Bell telephone network, but barely anywhere else. While Shockley had lost the battle, he had won the war. His name, not Bratton and Bardine's, would forever be linked with the transistor. I remember my first transistor radio. I used to bring it to school to try to secretly listen to the World Series. We used to plug an earphone into the back and then thread the earphone up our sleeves and hold it in our hand and listen to the score. And anytime a team scored a run, a little yay would go out through the classroom. We thought we were fooling our teachers until they asked for the score. Transistorized and solid state became buzzwords, marketing terms. Transistorized, we didn't know what a transistor did, but we did know that solid state meant state of the art. So anything that was transistorized was not only smaller, but had to be better. Within a few years, what was first thought to be simply a replacement for the vacuum tube began to change the world. Anything electronic could now be made portable and cheap. Transistor radios began to influence popular culture. Now that kids could listen to music out of earshot of their disapproving parents, music became more daring and revolutionary. And the radio transformed more than just music. It became a portable political weapon.
The transistor suddenly opened the floodgates of information. It made it possible for people who had never before been a party to world dramas to be there in a front row seat.
This point was driven home to Charles Stewart in 1968 while visiting Bedouin tribes in the Sahara Desert.
As the tea was being poured and passed around, that my hosts turned to me and said, "Why this time are they burning Detroit?" And the story then they had to unfold, I didn't know myself, was that I was sitting a few hours away from the moment when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and they themselves had picked this information up, of course, with their transistors, from Cairo, from Moscow, from London.
The transistor radio had become the first tool of the information age. But by now, the once great team of Shockley, Bratton, and Bardeen had crumbled.
Essentially what happened is Shockley drove them both out of Bell Labs. Certainly drove Bardeen out of Bell Labs. Bardeen went several times to his managers and said, I have to work without this man.
John Bardeen was the first to leave. In 1951, he appealed to his old friend, Fred Seitz, a physicist at the University of Illinois.
I went to the dean and said, look, here's your chance to get a world beater. And he managed, with some difficulty, but by piecing pieces of budget together to make him a reasonable offer. I thought they should have offered him more, but when I mentioned the figure to John, he said, that's enough for me.
By 1955, Shockley's reputation as a terrible manager finally caught up with him. It became clear that he would not receive further promotions at Bell Labs. So he decided to leave the East Coast and move west.
Let's go surfing now, everybody's learning how. Come on a safari with me.
This is Palo Alto, just south of San Francisco. It's one of the richest towns in the whole world because it's literally at the center of California's high-tech industry. But back in 1955, all of this was just another sleepy little college town, the home of Stanford University. Shockley knew this place well because he grew up here. That's his boyhood home. So he came back for two reasons. One, his mother still lived in town, and two, he knew the warm California weather would help attract the bright, young talent that he needed for his new company. You see, Shockley was famous. Now he wanted to become rich and famous.
He began recruiting engineers from Bell Labs for his new company, Shockley Semiconductor. But no one would join. They all knew his reputation. So he looked for others more eager.
Shockley had one indisputable talent. He had the ability to spot talent in other people. He did that with his company. He did that at Bell Labs. He was probably the best scientific recruiter of his time.
Among the first people Shockley hired were Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore. Years later, they would go on to found Intel. But they got their start working for Bill Shockley.
When I first got hired by Bill Shockley, I had no idea what this industry could be. In fact, I don't think anyone had any idea that it would really change so much of the world. We were just interested in seeing if we could make a transistor that somebody might want to buy.
Shockley Semiconductor had been running less than a year when Shockley was awakened by an early morning phone call.
It was somebody claiming to be from Stockholm, telling him he had just won the Nobel Prize to be shared with John Bardeen and Walter Brattain for the invention of the transistor. And after he got over his initial surprise, he realized it was true. And great celebration erupted.
Well, I certainly do remember the day Bill got the Nobel Prize. I never adjourned to start drinking champagne at 9 o'clock in the morning on any other occasion in my life.
The trio attended the ceremony with their wives and families. Shockley brought his mother. The Swedish Academy called their work, quote, a supreme effort of foresight, ingenuity, and perseverance, exercised individually and as a team. After the ceremonies, John Bardeen and Walter Brattain were sharing a nightcap in the hotel bar. In walked Bill Shockley. They'd changed the world. They'd gone their separate ways. They'd won the most prestigious award in science. And for this night, at least, they'd put their differences aside.
It seemed at that point that all of the hard feelings of the past years had kind of evaporated. They were the heroes in Valhalla. They were the gods of the field. And a lot of the ill feelings began to melt away.